Hey everybody, welcome to the Eastwood Garage. Cameraman Joe here with Matt. You guys might remember me from a previous video where Bob Green from the store told me the intro to MIG welding. And now that I've mastered that, I'm going to tackle some TIG welding today, and Matt's going to walk me through it. As always, we want this to be as social and interactive as possible. So we have Cody today over here on social helping us out.
Yep, I'll answer any of your questions. We may answer some live, so feel free to post them up on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll get them answered.
Sweet. So let's get started. Matt, let's dive in.
So you had a little session with Bob, and he taught you some of the basics of MIG welding. TIG welding, you're going to see some similarities for sure in some of the things you do, but the actual process itself is a lot different. So we're going to be using the TIG 200 AC/DC unit today. It's obviously, we have it on 220, but it does work on 110 as well. The big difference here is you're going to be actually feeding the filler rod instead of the filler rod or the wire feeding itself. You're going to be actually holding filler rod. You're going to be holding the torch. There's a tungsten, which is essentially creating your arc, and that's what you're going to be doing. And you're going to actually add the filler rod to it. So a little bit different. Have you ever used an oxyacetylene torch before?
I have not.
No? All right. Well then, that reference I usually use is out the window. But it's a lot like oxyacetylene welding for the process, but there's a little bit more going on. If you're good at video games as a kid, you might be good at this. So we'll set the machine up back here. I know it's going to be tough for everybody to get here, but we're using a difference. We're going to be using 100% argon.
Okay.
So the label right here will show you on the front there. Before you were using a mix. So with TIG welding, that's the big difference that beginners sometimes don't realize, that there is a specific gas you use. So turn the bottle on, and you're going to run about anywhere from 10 to 15 CFH. So similar to probably what Bob was telling you for the flow on the MIG welder. It's about the same. So you can adjust that in. I already have that set up there. And of course, we're going to turn the switch on the back. Now on the front here, for just a beginner today, we're just going to teach you just heavier steel. So we're not going to get into aluminum or any of the more intermediate or advanced stuff. So on the front of this particular machine.
Yeah, let's make sure the cameraman can see that.
So this here, there's a power knob on this. So this welder has the option of using a finger switch or a foot pedal. Today we're using the foot pedal, which we'll get to in a second. So this knob we're not actually using. We're going to adjust it on the foot pedal. The clearance effect is something that's only used on the AC side or aluminum. So you're not going to be using that knob today, but it is used when you're doing aluminum. So the important ones on the front of the machine here is the pre and post flow. So when you were welding with Bob with the MIG welding, there wasn't really anything you had to do with the gas. You just hit the trigger, it went on, and that was it. So with TIG welding, you can have some more adjustability. So the pre-flow, as it sounds, is it's coming out before you start welding. So before the arc starts, you're going to have a little bit of gas coming out. So you can adjust this to, you know, depending on what you're welding, how clean the metal is. You may not have to turn it up as high, but I usually keep it anywhere from 0.3 to 0.4 seconds. Is a good base to set that at. The post flow is how much gas comes out after you're done welding. So with the MIG welder, our MIG 175 or 135, you can hear the gas comes out after you're done welding. It's kind of a preset feature into it. This, you can actually control that, so you can go all the way up to 8 seconds. So on this, I usually go anywhere from 2 to 4 seconds afterwards. And what that's going to do is it's going to keep the impurities out of the weld for that few seconds where the metal might still be molten and might be susceptible to getting impurities in the air or in the metal might get into that. So
okay,
you can play with that knob to get it to where you want. You don't want to turn it up too crazy because you're just basically wasting gas at that point. When you're welding with steel, usually it cools pretty quickly, and you don't have to run the post flow quite as high as if you were doing stainless or aluminum or something like that, where it's a little more touchy. So that's those two knobs. On the side here, we have the foot and panel control. So like I was mentioning about the finger switch, if you want to work off the finger switch, you'll put it on panel control, and that's going to activate it so that you can use the amperage control there. And then on the torch, you can hit the finger switch here, And that's a fixed amperage. So when you hit this, it's not like the pedal where you're going to get a varied amperage. Like with this, you're just getting what it is on the machine right away. Boom.
Okay.
So if we set it at 100 amps, you're going to get 100 amps right when you hit the trigger. So this is sometimes good for just learning because you don't have the pedal in there, but you don't have the ability to change the heat of the arc. So that can be difficult as well for a beginner. So that's the foot pedal. We're welding on steel, so it's DC. Most of the welding you're going to be doing, except if you do aluminum, for the most part, you're going to be welding on DC. So your stainless steel, your mild steel is going to be on the DC side. The other feature we have is a TIG or a stick function. Have you done any stick welding yet?
No, I have
Yeah,
not.
so stick welding, we should do another one with that. Actually, we probably should have done that one first. But you mastered MIG so quick, you will get stick welding in no time. So stick welding is another function here. We're not going to keep it short, we're not going to get real into that. So I'm going to keep it on the TIG side. And now the last thing is the foot pedal. So I have one set up here. This is the one that comes with the machine, just so you guys aren't staring at our feet here. So this is the foot pedal that comes with it. And Joe, so you can see, this is where you're adjusting your amperage control.
Okay.
So what you're setting here is your max amperage. So when you figure out what you want to do in weld, it goes obviously all the way up to 200 amps. So you're going to set that at what you want your max amperage. So what I like to do is set it past what I actually want to be welding at. So if you want to be welding at 140 amps, you might put it at 160, just so you have a little bit of extra pedal there.
Okay.
To kind of control the heat or the arc.
And just feather your way with the pedal kind of gradually to that max and let off the...
It's all in the feel of it.
It's all in the feel of it?
Yeah, so you may start off hotter in the beginning because the metal is cool, doesn't have any heat into it unless you've preheated it. So you may run hotter in the beginning. Once the piece gets some heat into it, it's not going to take, say, 160 amps. It's only going to take 130 amps. So you may back off the pedal.
Okay.
Something that you might have seen me do, when you're filming, is I pump the pedal like this.
Yeah.
This is controlling the heat, and I'll pump the pedal so that right when I put filler into it, you heat it so that it kind of accepts the filler more easily, and you back off. So that takes time to get that. You can run just at a rate that's comfortable for you, and then eventually you'll start to learn how to see what the puddle's doing. That's when you back off.
So that's like a manual like pulse setting, basically.
Yeah, that's what it's all. A pulse
kinda
setting's doing the same thing you're doing with your foot.
Okay.
Like we have on the digital machine, that's automating it for you. But sometimes with beginners, I've seen guys that they see people pumping the pedal and they think they need to do that, and it doesn't do it if you don't know when to do it or how to do it exactly. So so set this pedal just a little hotter than you think you need it to be. We have the chart on the top here. That's a great starting point. That's going to tell you your cup size. It's going to tell you your gas flow, tungsten diameter. It's going to kind of give you a base setting for all of that so you can get going. But the most important thing is right here, there's an amperage. It's going to give you a range that you should set the pedal to. So that's a good starting point. You may find that you run it a little bit hotter than it says on there. I personally run it a little bit hotter because I like to try and move a little quicker. But that's going to get you right in the ballpark to get you started. So I know it's a lot to take in, so you'll probably forget that beforehand.
That's definitely perfect for a newbie like me.
So we are welding 1/8" steel today. What I have set up in here is we'll show you. So that's that pedal. We're going to be using our upgraded pedal. I'll just show that real quick for anybody that's watching. A little more ergonomic. This style, you actually put your heel into the pedal versus this one, it's more like a sewing machine where you're just using your toe. When you do start to pump the pedal or move the pedal around a lot, because of this style, it may want to walk a little bit on you. So by keeping your heel in here, when you're moving the pedal around or pumping it around, it's a little more comfortable. That's the big difference with this. So I'm going to set you up with this, especially when you're standing, it's a lot better. This one isn't as bad, but when you're standing, I've found it will walk on us. So we're going to keep it down here. No, I have the amperage, same thing. I have the amperage set here. So I'm going to set it to 140 amps.
Okay.
So that's more than we need, but that's going to give you some that you can go down further if you want to weld. So now the business end here, the torch. So we'll do a quick breakdown of the torch for you before we start welding, and then we're going to get right into welding here. So this is a back cap here. They vary in length, of course. So that's got a little O-ring. Make sure you always check this O-ring. I've seen these rip where they pull out over their seat, and then you'll actually start leaking gas out the backside because that keeps the gas from coming out of the back of the torch. So make it a habit to always, you know, check it when you're taking it off or putting it on. The tungsten here that we have. So this is 332nd tungsten. That's the purple band that we sell. You've probably seen the E3. So Joe's got that in his hand there. So that's 332nd. It's a little thicker for the higher amperage welding that we're doing. You can, depending on your preference, you can use a smaller tungsten, but that's once you get a little more comfortable, you can go to a smaller size, depending on what you're doing. So this is the collet here, and you'll notice this has these little slits cut in it on either side. So what that does is when it gets pressed inside, it actually squeezes down. This back cap's going to press against it, push it in there in the seat, and it's going to squeeze it down so that it tightens down on that, on that collet. So make sure you check this too. Sometimes if you use a machine that's used by a bunch of people, if somebody cranks the back cap down too tight, they can actually collapse this and it'll get all deformed, and then it'll be really tough to get your tungsten out. And sometimes it's just that this has been cranked down too tight, so that can happen. Don't do that. Don't tighten it down too much.
So that's how you're going to adjust your depth, I guess, in the collet or in the cup?
You're going to adjust your depth. That's just basically how it clamps it down. But yes, you can slide it in and out as you go. So this is the cup, and this is just our standard traditional cup that we have in here. And you have the collet body. So there's holes, just like the MIG welder Bob was showing you with how the gas comes out. So this is where the gas comes out of that, and it kind of bounces around and fogs out of the cup there.
Okay.
So this goes in the backside, the collet. This slides through all of those, and then yes, you can set your distance that's coming out of there, like so. So that'll
how far out are we? What are we shooting for here?
A good way for a beginner, a quick jump start, and I'll tell you for a beginner, is put it just past where the grinding stops when you're grinding a tungsten. That's a quick way in your head that you can set it. So if you look at it and go just a little bit past, say a 16th or so past the grinding, it's probably hard to see there. There we go. But just past where your grinding is stopped, where it's just fresh tungsten, that's a good place to start. Again, depending on the weld joint you're doing or your preference, you may go further out or more in, but that's a good place for a beginner to start. So I usually set it after I start getting everything threaded in pretty close. So it's snug there. So now we can adjust it. So I'll set it. I'll let you set it. What am I doing?
All right, let's see here. Oh, where'd it go?
So slide that in just so you can just see maybe a 16th of the unground tungsten. Now as you tighten the back down, it'll actually push the tungsten out a little bit if you don't have it just about snug like that.
Okay.
So that's something to keep an eye out. But that's pretty good stick out on the tungsten there.
That'll do.
That'll do.
Cool.
So that's your torch on that. Now the other part is the filler rod. So we're using steel filler rod here because we're welding mild steel. You can use 1/16 or 3/32. That's a preference thing, depending on what you're doing and how fast you want to travel. Basically, the thing that changes is how much filler rod you're adding to the metal. So when you're using a 3/32, you don't have to put as much filler rod in at a time. So you can just put a dab in, and it'll be the same as putting 2 dabs of this in.
Okay.
So, but your puddle's also going to be a little larger. So for a beginner, doing a thicker steel, 3/32 I think is a good one to start with to get you going because you can really see what's going on. So feeding the filler rod, have you thought about which hand you're going to hold the torch in, the filler rod?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of playing with it beforehand, and holding the filler rod with my right hand seems to be comfortable. I'm right-handed, so I don't know whether that matters either way. I know you hold it similarly, right?
No, I'm left-handed, so I hold the torch in my strong hand. But my thought with that when I started was I get more dexterity from moving the torch around. But I know Bob's actually the way you're saying, where he's right-handed, but he feels he gets better control with feeding the filler rod. So it's all just how comfortable you feel. But either way, there's no wrong way. It's just whatever works with you. So if you feel like you have more control, just strong hand feeding the filler rod, That's how you do it. Now that's going to change the way you travel. That's the big thing.
Okay.
So if you're going to hold the torch in the left hand, you're going to start on the left and travel to the right. So you're going to actually turn your torch back, say 10 or 15 degrees, like that, and you travel like that. So you're going to turn the back cap away, where you're turning your tungsten towards the weld, and you're traveling. The sole reason for that basically is so you can see what you're doing.
Okay.
So you can see you can weld. So you can hold the torch a bunch of different ways. I like to hold it, imagine like you're holding a pencil when you write, like so, kind of like this. So you'd hold you imagine this part of is like a pencil. So
Okay.
since we don't have the switch activated, you can hold on to the switch. Don't want to hold anywhere where it starts narrowing down is the danger zone. That's where it gets hot. So
I'll choke back a little bit.
yeah, you want to choke back a little bit. Again, that's the thing I've seen beginners, they hold it up in here and they wonder why their hand gets so darn hot.
So for consistency's sake, I'll just hold it like this and then adjust accordingly. But this seems fairly comfortable.
Yeah, so, and you, like I said, you can grip that switch, it's not going to do anything. So the filler rod, that's just whatever feels comfortable for feeding the filler rod. So you want to be able to feed the filler rod as you go. So what I do is I use my thumb. I put one on my middle finger here. I kind of put the weight down, and then I use my thumb, put some pressure down, and then I just use the other finger to keep it from sliding away. And then you can kind of grab claw or whatever you want to call it like that. And I use my thumb to kind of help guide it, slide it. So that's the biggest thing with learning TIG welding is learning how to feed the filler rod, for sure. So you need to practice that when you're watching football or the Grammys or whatever you watch. I don't know what you watch on TV, but grab some filler rod, feed it along.
Cool.
And go. Cody, do we have any questions at all before I get?
Yeah, I got two good questions for you, Matt.
Great.
Make sure, yeah, mic's on.
So now that the mic's on, I got two good questions for you.
Sure.
Old School Repair Shop, he wants to know, how often do you have filler rod when you're welding aluminum?
How often?
Yeah. So are you,
How often do I add filler rod? The question is whenever the workpiece tells you to. You can see when a weld's opening up. So when you're welding, there's either what's called like a keyhole, or you can see the puddle where it opens up. And when you start seeing it open up, you need to add filler rod at that point. So it's really a preference thing. Some people like to add filler rod often and really fast. Other people will add a bunch of filler rod in a dip and then move further. So it's all, you basically just want to watch the puddle and don't let it get out of control. On aluminum especially, you need to move fast. So you're either going to add a bunch of filler rod and move quick, or you're going to be dipping and moving quite often. So just make sure you keep that puddle under control and it doesn't get too large. So when I set the pulse, I set it 1 pulse per second, and that's when I add my filler rod. So that's, if there's an actual timing, that would be my answer. So on our machine, on our digital, I set the pulse to 1 pulse per second. So every second, when it pulses, I'm adding filler rod as you go. So that could be a starting point, but if you're just starting out, that might be a little quick for you. You may want to go with a second and a half, but just whatever it asks for. Good one.
and then Arm Legos, he wants to know if he can use regular MIG wire in an emergency.
Oh, for TIG welding?
Yes.
Yeah, you can definitely use regular MIG wire. Some guys do that for when you're welding sheet metal. That's something I do quite often. If you're welding sheet metal, you can use MIG wire. Just make sure that you're cleaning the wire really well. We're going to get into that in a second, where cleanliness with a TIG is even more important than with a MIG. So I a lot of times take a scuff pad like this on the MIG wire, and I'll scuff it out real quick. Another thing you can do is you can put the MIG wire in a vise and with a drill, and you can spin it, and it'll actually straighten the wire so it's not so floppy if you're making a bunch of that. But most definitely, yeah, the short answer is you definitely can.
And then I actually got 2 more questions
Cool.
on Facebook.
Awesome.
One guy wanted to know, can he use the same helmet as when he MIG welds?
Oh, okay. The same helmet, I definitely suggest using an auto dim helmet if you can. So if you have an auto dim helmet, most definitely. The only thing is that the range that you may be welding with TIG, sometimes I say a little bit darker of a shade is needed. So if you have an adjustable lens on it, it's no problem at all. Just make sure you're adjusting it so that you're getting, so that the lens is dark enough. But with a TIG, you can also go way down to, like, say, our digital goes down to 10 amps. So you can actually turn the helmet down a little bit. But yeah, same helmet, just make sure you're adjusting it so it's correct.
Okay, and then where do you set your gas at?
So we jumped around a little bit, but on here on our gauge, there's 2 settings. And so we have this set, actually Joe will in a second. So right now it's set, before we hit it, it's about 20 CFH. So Joe, if you just tap the pedal real quick and let off, you'll see that it drops down considerably. So go ahead and hit it again. There we go. So around 10 to 15. So I'll start at 20, but when you hit the pedal and you're actually welding, it's going to drop down to 10 or 15 CFH. You may need more flow if you're doing something that's in a sharp angle, or if you have a lot of stick out on your tungsten, you may need to turn the gas up. Sometimes with aluminum, I'll crank the gas higher or stainless, so I get a lot more gas flow on it. But when you're starting out, that's 10 to 15 is good.
Okay.
Any other ones?
James Titus wants to know, is there a working time like MIG for TIG? And
working time.
I'm not exactly sure what he's asking for that, so I'll have him elaborate.
Yeah, if he can elaborate what he means by working time on that, I'm not quite sure what he means, but that sounds like it could be a pretty interesting one. All right, so great questions, guys. Definitely keep asking them. Cody's a good welder as well. He can answer a bunch himself, and he'll throw some over to Joe and myself. So, filler rod, we got all that going. So cleaning the workpiece is the next thing, and then we'll get into a little bit of safety here too. So cleaning needs to be, I would say, as close to surgically clean as your OCD will allow you to get, depending on your level of OCD. So this piece here, it looks fairly clean. I mean, it has a little bit of oil on it, but this has like a layer on it that basically keeps it from flash rusting. They put like an oil or a layer on these, depending on what you're doing. You need to clean that off. So even though this looks pretty clean, I'm going to take this one. We'll let you use that one. You can use the low VOC pre. That's the key, is the low VOC version of our pre is okay to use. To clean this with, you can use a stainless wire brush as well. But on something that's already fresh metal like this, that's pretty clean, what you can do is you can use, you might want to put your gloves on just to make sure.
Gloves on.
Keep the acetone off of the acetone and any chemicals off of your hands here. So the it dissolves pretty quickly, the low VOC. So what I do is I spray a bit on the scuff pad and then just quick hit it. Oh, okay, sure.
Is that a lot?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's all right though. So you'll start to see that it's kind of, don't be afraid to press hard.
I am pressing hard.
Oh, okay. So we're going to focus you right here to start. So just get in that area, definitely scuff it pretty good. There you go, that should be good. All right, so you see it flashes off really quick. We'll let that flash off and everything. I'm going to hit this one real quick on mine. And you want this to be really clean. So if there's any paint, any rust, anything but fresh, clean metal, you need to get it off. So with MIG welding, sometimes you could get by with welding over something that might have a little bit of it's not the best to do, but you can get by with welding over something that's not perfectly clean. Guys do it all the time. TIG welding, it'll pop and carry on, and it'll actually contaminate your tungsten, and you have to regrind the tungsten. So make sure it's very clean. You can see the difference once it flashes off on these between, say, here on the corner. Maybe let me show the camera a little bit. So you can see the area right here where I cleaned, and over here where I didn't touch it with the pre, it's darker. You can see a couple little spots where maybe it got hit a little bit, but it's more of a bright silver here, like a brush finish. You're going to see on that. That's where it's plenty clean. It's pretty good. Once it flashes off and everything, we'll be good to go on that. I'm just going to hit mine again. Make sure that's good. So
It's good technique.
whatever that was. All right, so let that flash off as we're talking here. You can use the stainless brush. Make sure you separate your stainless brushes between aluminum and steel, because when you're working with aluminum or steel, it's going to get particles in it of whatever metal you're working. And if you use this on the steel and then we go on aluminum, you're going to drive pieces of steel right into your aluminum, and it's going to give you a dirty, contaminated weld.
Cross-contaminate it.
So you don't want to do that. Don't cross streams. So we'll get our low VOC pre way out of the way there, and we got our filler rod. So I'll show you before we actually strike an arc here. So like I was telling you briefly, so when you get your torch set up, big thing is get your hand or the heel of your hand steady. Whether you put it on the edge of a table, something I teach a lot is when you're first learning, is put your workpiece close to the edge of the table on a nice straight edge here. And what you can do is put the heel of your hand on it. That's going to keep you nice and steady, and it's also going to keep you on a straight line. So as you run across, you set your workpiece to where you want it to be, and you run on that straight edge there. So you're not going to get crooked or move around, because it's hard, trying to remember everything. It takes one thing out of the equation there by doing that. So you can put it on there, real light pressure in your hand. Don't put all your body weight on there, because you're not going to be able to move. So you want light pressure so you can just slide across. A quick way to set up your distance from the workpiece, a way that I teach that always worked for me when I was learning, set your filler rod that you're using down and put your tungsten so it's just above that.
Okay.
So what that is that's giving you a good height when you take that away to work. If you are lower than that, you're going to have a tendency that when you go to put that filler rod in, it's going to take a dab of filler rod off, and it's going to be taller than the workpiece. And if your tungsten's lower than what this is, you're going to melt the tungsten and the filler together. So if you set it up when you're getting yourself locked in so you're just above the filler rod, you're going to be at a real good height so that you know you're not going to do that.
Okay.
So I'm just a little bit above that. So when you take that away, as long as you don't move your hand around too much, you're going to be at a good height that you won't dip the tungsten in. So that's a way that I think helps with keeping from dipping the tungsten in. If you dip the tungsten in, you need to stop, pull the tungsten out, and regrind it on the sander there, which we will show in a little bit. So you get your height set. Then you need to turn, since you're doing left-handed like I also am, you just turn your hand back. Like I said, 10 to 15 degrees is a good starting point. The more you turn your hand, it's going to open up the arc, and it's actually going to start sending the arc across the workpiece, and you're heating out way ahead of where you're actually welding. So it's going to be, you're going to get contamination because your gas is going away, and also your workpiece is going to get really hot and could be distorted. If you work on something thinner, it's going to distort it and possibly fall through, cause issues. So keep it, like I said, 10 to 15 degrees. The back cap back 10 to 15 degrees. And then what you're doing is you're adding filler just in front of the tungsten. So you don't want to be adding filler underneath of the tungsten because you're going to end up hitting it. It's just in front. So when we start the arc, it's going to make a little circle is going to open up, and you're going to add it to the front of that circle. You're going to go dab, 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 just in front. So what you do is you move half of the circle every time. So when you see a puddle open up, it's going to be a round circle. You're going to add filler rod and move about half of that puddle, and then add more filler rod. And that's a good way to do that. You always stay ahead with your filler rod of your puddle. So when you get underneath of it, it's going to probably grow, or you're going to touch it in there in the puddle, and it's going to cause an issue. So try and keep ahead of it. So 10 to 15 degrees. We're moving left to right since you're left-handed, and you're going to keep your dabs just in front of that.
Stacking dimes.
Yeah, you'll be doing that within a couple minutes.
Second or third run, I'll have.
People are probably wondering if you're sandbagging it. You go like 2 runs, and he's like a master welder. Joe is a true beginner. He's dabbled a little bit with the MIG now since he learned, but he really hasn't done. I don't know if maybe once you fired up the TIG or something like that.
Yeah, maybe once, maybe 2 years ago.
Unsupervised.
Yeah.
He's operating a camera for 6 years.
Yeah. So Joe is trying to get on the other end of the camera here and actually do some welding. So you feeling comfortable?
I'm feeling comfortable, man. Let's dive in.
So we're going to show grinding the tungsten after you dip it in the puddle.
Okay.
Since we know you're going to do that.
So
but I'm going to show you a weld here real quick. Make sure our gas is on, which we got.
I wasn't paying attention. What shade should I be at?
Ah, good. And we do need to cover our quick safety. So, I did not mention that. So the shade, we're welding, since we're going to be welding 140, 160 amps max. So, first thing on your helmet is your helmet has a switch on the inside that you can go on the range. So you want to put it to the 9 to 13.
I'm there.
Okay. So make sure on the side here, you want to be anywhere from 10 or 11 is a good point for where we're welding. And make sure you're in the right range there. So on some of these helmets that have the switch, there's 2 different scales. So you want to make sure you're on the right. Since we're at 10 to 11, it's pretty much in the closer to the center there on that. So that's a good one to start out. On the inside here, there's also these knobs that are set. They're probably going to be hard to get there.
Yeah.
But there's a delay. You're going to have to take our word for it. And a sensitivity knob in there. So you want to turn it pretty far to the sensitivity, which you have. It looks like you have yours almost all the way up. And then you want the delay to be down near the minimum. So make sure it's pretty far. So what that's going to do is it's not going to have a big delay between lightening and darkening.
Okay.
And the sensitivity is turned up so that it's going to darken, with just a little bit of light. The only time that can be an issue is if you're welding, like some of our lights sometimes can mess it up, or if you're welding outside, the sunlight can make it go off, and you might have to turn the sensitivity down a little bit so it's not dark all the time when you're out there. So
That makes sense.
in here, you're pretty good with keeping the sensitivity pretty far up.
Okay.
Now for safety, always wear gloves. Definitely wear a long sleeve shirt if you can, especially if you're doing any high amperage welding. If you're doing low amperage, it's not as crazy with the heat. But when you're definitely doing some higher stuff, you want to try and have long sleeves on because of the UV that's coming off and also just the heat. Gloves, you don't want to get zapped. So the heat, and you don't want to get zapped. So when you're grounding this, make sure you have a good ground. When you're welding, if you touch this tungsten, or if your hand's on the workpiece and you get a bad ground, it might jump to you from here to the other hand. So make sure you have a good ground. Make sure you're not sweaty, like you don't have like your t-shirt soaked because it's 90 degrees outside and you're in your garage, because obviously it can be conductive.
I'll complete the circuit.
Yes.
Okay.
And you don't want that to happen, obviously. I mean, maybe you do, but I don't want it to happen. So make sure you're doing that. Obviously, the helmet on. It's really easy to get flashed with TIG by somebody that's around, even if they're catching it from the side of their view. So definitely make sure that if you have anybody watching, they're not looking right at it. So,
Can I dive in?
yeah, I think you can.
Let's do it.
All right. And don't touch the metal because it's going to be hot. All right. So you might actually be better, Joe, to go where Randy's standing so you can see the puddle a little better.
Okay.
Since I'm left-handed, we're going to show you to try and contort myself here. So you're going to see I'm going to start a puddle at a low amperage, and the nice thing with the pedal is you can go from a low amperage here and just make what I call like your flashlight. So you're just making, you're starting an arc, but you're not actually getting hot enough to really create a puddle to weld. So can you see that circle opening up there?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give it a little more pedal. So now we're getting closer to where we want to be. Now if that puddle opens up, I'm going to add to the front of the puddle there. Move a little bit, add to the front. I'm going nice and slow here so you can. You see how I'm keeping ahead of the puddle as I'm welding. And I'll show you now. If we, I was telling you about the turning your torch too much. So I'm at 10 to 15 degrees. If I turn the torch, see how our puddle's going way out? And it's melting my filler rod before I even get to it, and you can see it's sparking because we're getting contaminants in it. So we're going to turn it back to like 10 degrees. And you can kind of see the puddle kind of takes it off the filler rod. So it kind of tells you what it needs unless you're trying to fill a seam, but for when you're just learning, just lay it in the front of that puddle there like that. Alright, and then at the end, put a little dab on, back your pedal off slowly, and you keep your hand over the puddle until the gas stops.
It's all good.
Alright?
Okay. Yeah, that was one thing when I was MIG welding. I was always excited to pull away and look at it, and I was letting the gas disperse.
yeah,
I
yeah.
wasn't letting the gas do its job.
Right, so on TIG, you definitely don't want to do that because it's going to create like a little crack or a crater in your weld, which is actually like if it's a weld seam and you're welding right in the center of the seam, you're going to put a crater or crack right in the center of your weld seam, which they could crack all the way back up through if it's something that has some kind of stress on it. That's hot. Safety. Don't touch. All right?
My turn.
Yes.
Excellent.
So there's your torch. Pedals live. Get on the other side. I'm going to try and coach you through this.
Okay.
Now we're going to, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask them because we're going to take some questions after Joe shows us how it's done.
Got this.
All right. So what I like to do is even before you put your foot on the pedal, get yourself set with your hands. You know, so you're
So something like
yep,
this.
so about right there.
Be able to move with it.
Good. And you keep the heel of your hand locked on that table there.
Okay. So
So you can just push the pedal real light. It's like gas pedal in a car. So go real light till you get an arc started. Okay. And now just look for that puddle open up. Keep your torch up a little bit. You dropped already. There you go. Alright, now a little more pedal. There you go. And now add dab to the front of the puddle. Front of the puddle. There you go. Now just wait for that. There you go. And you move half the puddle's distance. Dab. Dab. Good. And you want to move your torch a little more, travel a little more in your dab. There you go. Now drop your torch a little bit. You're getting a little high there. There you go. Okay. Stay ahead of it. Drop your torch a little bit. You're getting a little far from the workpiece. There you go.
how far should I go?
Alright. Now one little dab, back off the pedal slow, and hold it there. Good. Not bad. It's getting hot.
It is getting hot.
You were moving kind of like you were moving real slow, so the workpiece is heating up and your hand's still in the hot area. But you can see on yours, you can see how you're just getting, the heat was coming out and getting like, bright purple in there. You're getting nice and hot.
Nice. Let's get a shot of the tungsten.
He didn't. I don't think he touched there.
Did not touch.
Incredible. Get that documented.
Hashtag TIG life.
So I ground the tungsten for you to a point. When you're just starting out, best way to learn is just kind of grind it to a point. Once you start learning a little better, you may flatten the end more or less depending on the type of arc you want. So basically, the sharper it is, the more fine and pinpointed your arc's going to be. If you put a flat spot on the end of it, the larger the flat spot is, the more the arc's going to open
Kinda
up and
cone
cone
out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So when keeping the puddle under control, because I knew you were moving slow, I put a point on it, and then it's keeping the puddle as small as possible, basically, for that.
I gotta work on that.
Feels unusual.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It feels a little odd.
But that's why I hold the torch with my strong hand, because I feel I have more dexterity. So
Oh, yeah.
try running another one maybe then. Cody, questions? We got answers.
So we actually do not have any questions right
What?
now. We're all good. We got them all answered. So
Holy
one
crap.
guy actually was asked, what does TIG welding stand for? TIG. So it's tungsten inert gas. Otherwise, we're good.
Sweet.
Right on.
All right, they want to see you weld.
So am I gonna lay another one?
Yeah, let's do one short one here. Try moving a little quicker
Okay.
this time. And then what I'm gonna have you do is we're gonna put the two pieces together and try and have you do a fusion weld real quick. And we'll show you that, and then we'll do a little short puddle on. So we're gonna have you do another one here. Try and in your head move a little faster with your dabs and your travel this time.
Okay. Just a little bit. All right, let's see. Feeling a little more comfortable. All right. Ready to rock?
Yep, go ahead. All right, now wait for that puddle to open up before you add any. There you go. Now add. Dab. Oop. Dab. Get your torch down a little bit. You're going too high. There you go. It's a little better. Now you can back off the pedal a little bit because now it's getting, see how your puddle's opening up real big? There you go. So your puddle, that was an instance where you started off hot, but as you got some heat into the workpiece, you actually could back off the pedal a little bit. So your puddle was starting to really open up there at the end.
So how did I do?
So in here, let me grab a piece so we're not touching. So in here you can see it's up above the workpiece there. So there you added filler rod, moved real quick. You can actually see it. You can read your weld there. So here you were going kind of slow, had a bit of heat into it, and all of a sudden you jumped real far and put a bunch of filler rod in.
It didn't really penetrate.
And yeah,
It's kind of proud.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that might have been where you were lifting the torch up a little higher and you're losing your amperage a little bit in there. And then in here, you were moving along okay, but you started to lift your torch up again and it started really getting heat into the workpiece, and that's where you started to go slow again. So your puddle really opened up. It's real flat here, but the puddle's getting quite wide in there. And here you were adding almost no filler rod, but you had a ton of heat in it because you were kind of trying to move around and get comfortable in there. So I would say this section right in here, you were doing okay. But then the heat started to build up. It was starting to not get out of control, but it was getting larger and you had to add more filler rod to equalize it, and you weren't. So you can either back off the pedal just a tiny bit to keep moving, or you can add more filler rod and move quicker. Just you got to balance the heat and the size of the puddle all the way as you go. So
I mean, it's definitely a lot to try and remember.
about,
You know, I'm like pumping the pedal, got this to deal with, feeding this. At one point, I realized I had a lot of weight on this hand. So
that's
like,
where you jumped, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then,
Yeah, it's trying to balance. So you can definitely, when you're learning, you can sit in a chair as well and try and get yourself in a chair real comfortable sitting down and welding. I would say don't only do that, because in 90% of the time you're not welding sitting down. So don't get too used to that. But that is a good thing if you're just learning to get the weight, like how you're having problems with the weight on your hand. It might have just been because of the way you were kind of slouching down. So you can practice in a chair as well a little bit. So that's a good thing to do. So now I'm going to show you real quick before if anybody's got any questions, we'll take one more set of questions before we're done. But we're going to let Joe do a fusion weld, which is good for beginners to learn here. So,
is that the equivalent to like a tack weld?
yeah, but on a TIG, you can actually, because you just kind of have an arc come out here, we can melt with no filler rod. So we can actually melt everything together. So when you're tack welding a piece, we'll go on the end here. So what I'll do is I'll do one right here, and I'll show you, and then we'll flip it around, let you do one, and then we'll let you try and do a weld on an edge there.
All right.
So, we don't need our filler rod. So what you're going to do is you're going to, oh, I might have clicked my amperage there. No, we're good. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to start on the top here, on the top piece, and I'm going to get a puddle started with my pedal, and then I'm going to kind of like, not smash on the pedal, but I'm going to go pretty far, wide open throttle almost, and then I'm going to drag my puddle over. So you're actually going to take the puddle and start on the top. Once it starts melting, you're going to drag the metal or the puddle down onto the bottom piece. And once you see it melt down onto that bottom piece, then you can let off the pedal, and it's going to tack the two of them together because it's going to fuse all the metal together, which is, you know,
Let gravity do its thing.
yeah.
All right.
You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, so I'll go nice and slow so you can kind of see. So I'm starting there. You can see it's starting to melt. Now I'm going to hit it and move over and then let off. So you melt the two of them together. They're nice and tacked. Let you do the same over here.
All right.
It might be easier for you to do it this way. You can try right-handed.
Yeah, we'll try right-handed.
All right.
Why not? No, I won't go left.
All right.
Can I go two-handed?
You can try that if you'd like. So now start on your top piece there. Get over top of that. There you go. Yep. And then move your puddle down. Right there. Now let off. Do switch there. Good. Now you're tacked. All right. So I'm going to do one final one here, and then we're going to humble you real quick. So we're going to take your wire brush here, and we'll clean this seam just right here, because the sides of the metal we didn't clean. So when you go to weld the two of these together, this side here hasn't been cleaned. The flat's been cleaned, but the side hasn't. So we're going to go. All right, so we got that clean right in there. So what you're going to do is you're going to aim your tungsten towards basically the valley of that weld seam there. And you're going to get a puddle started right in that valley there. And once you see the puddle start and start to open up, then you're going to add your filler rod to connect the two of these together. And once you get a nice flow going of your puddle, then you can start to add your filler rod and move across.
Okay.
That first dab is kind of the most important, where you get a puddle going right in the center. If you start too much on the top or the bottom, you're already going to be off to a bad start, and you're not going to be fusing the two of them together evenly. So try and start with your piece in there. So now the other thing is, you may want to you can push your tungsten back. Remember I was telling you it depends on the tungsten sticking out, depends on what you're welding. So here you may be able to push the tungsten back a little bit, so it's not sticking out as far, so you might not hit the tungsten in the workpiece as much. So now we're set. Oh, thought he was getting close up there already. So now you're going to be set a little further in, so you can be closer to it and you're not touching the tip in there in the weld seam. So you're going to aim that right towards the valley and get a puddle going, and then I'll tell you when to. Let me turn your pedal. I'll turn your pedal up just a little more here. There you go. All right. Now you can move it closer to you if you want to get whatever's good for you, and the camera, of course.
All right, I think I'm ready.
All right, so aim your tungsten right into that valley there.
Let it rip.
Yep. Yep. All right, now start adding your filler. And move. Now aim more towards the bottom piece. More towards the bottom. There you go. And back off the pedal a bit. Here. You can still back off that pedal just a hair. There you go. Yep, and just trying to fill that seam up with the two of them. Good. And when you see that half moon shape in the front of the puddle, that's right where you want to add your filler. Right into that little keyhole or mouth. That's where you add your filler. There you go. Oop. It's alright. You can zap that off.
Torch is getting hot.
Yeah, your puddle opened up quite a bit there. That's alright.
Get in there a little bit.
I mean, you melted them together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing.
That's definitely structural.
Something. You definitely melted them together. But you know, you were getting your heat was really was getting a little out of control there. So
Get a good shot of this.
there we go. So you actually, once you got that puddle going, you wanted to back off the pedal. I was trying to get you to do that a little bit, but you got to back off the pedal because once you got the heat into the workpiece, you can kind of just work with that heat and then keep adding it. So you were starting to get undercut here way out into the center field.
Do you want this out of the way?
So that was not bad. I mean, you melded two of them together. Biggest thing I'm impressed is you didn't dip the tungsten in the puddle. That's usually something that we have happen quite often. Have you been practicing before this a little bit?
Of course not. I have not.
No, that's pretty good. Got a little handle here for your workpiece.
A little abstract art piece.
Yeah. Any questions, Cody?
Yeah, so Harry Sell on Facebook, he wants to know, what are the benefits of TIG welding over MIG welding?
So, like I always say, there's the best tool for the right tool that's best for the job. So TIG welding I like because it's a little bit cleaner. There's no sparks. You can control the heat a little bit more, especially when you're doing something that's a little more intricate. And with everything with the tungsten, there's a little bit more control that you can get with how much the stick out is of the tungsten and the filler that you add. Where with a MIG welder, once you set your MIG welder, you're kind of at your settings. You can't change them on the fly. So with a TIG, kind of like we were showing Joe, or I was telling Joe, back off the pedal or move this way or move that way. With a MIG, the only thing you can really change is the distance you have away from the workpiece while you're welding and your travel speed. So I like the control you can have, but there is definitely instances where a MIG is equal or better to use, and even when you're stick welding or arc welding, there's instances where that's better. But TIG welding, for automotive work, is definitely something that I like the most. But MIG welding, when I'm doing heavier stuff, sometimes MIG welding is just easier to do. But nothing beats a nice clean TIG weld for sure.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Well put, Matt.
Good job, Joe.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I was going to take the lead, but
All right, go ahead. Joe's got the next
All
one.
right, Joe.
All right, let's hear it.
Bart wants to know, thin sheet metal, does TIG welding have much of a chance of burning holes?
yes, absolutely. So with thin sheet metal, obviously, as you saw with my skill set, with sheet metal, there's not a lot of room for error. So as I'm fumbling around, heat's fluctuating, too hot at times, not hot enough. With sheet metal, you don't really have that leeway because obviously there's not a lot of metal there. So your chance of blowing through is greater. And also, what you have to be mindful of is that you can distort the metal pretty easily too, depending how much heat you put into it. I've learned that from Matt.
But Matt,
for filming him for all these years.
I know that you love to TIG weld sheet metal.
Yes.
So do you have any quick tips you might be able to tell some people?
The biggest thing with sheet metal TIG welding is cleanliness and fitment. Make sure that your work piece or your patch panel, whatever you're doing, it fits really, really well. With any type of welding, when you're welding on an edge, it tends to blow away. But TIG welding, that's the biggest thing I've seen is people try and TIG weld a patch panel or something, and their fitment is really bad, so there's big holes or inconsistencies, and you're blowing holes in it right away because of that. So make sure the first step before you even turn the TIG welder on is make sure that your patch panel fits really, really nicely. So from there, it's just a matter of setting your machine up and being, really, really intricate with how you're welding. That just takes time and practice, but make sure your patch panels or whatever you're welding fits really, really nice when you're doing sheet metal, because that's going to cause you the biggest problems.
Okay, and then on YouTube we had a question about when you tack weld, do you ever add filler wire as well, or do you just make a fusion tack?
Oh, okay, that's good. When I tack weld, depending on, depending on the job, something here where we're just trying to get the piece to stick together and stay so that it doesn't move when we're welding, you can just fusion weld it. But if it's something where that tack is going to be integral to the rest of the weld, most definitely add filler rod in that case there. But a fusion weld is a real quick way. If you don't have enough hands or you don't have something to fixture the piece down, you can use one of your hands or something to hold the piece down on the other end, fusion weld it together, and then at least you can get your hands freed up. But most definitely, you can add filler to that tack weld if you need to. There's no problem with that at all. Just today I was showing Joe another one of the good things to learn as a beginner. Fusion weld's one of the things that you learn to teach you puddle control. So, good.
Okay, and then Mark Cana, he wants to know, how do you know when you're running it too hot? So I guess if you have too much heat in the panel, like what are some tips?
Oh, okay.
Do you see it blow through, or how can you prevent it from happening before you create a hole?
Right. One thing, like I mentioned earlier in one of the questions, you can actually watch your puddle. So you can watch your puddle actually opening up. So when you're welding, if it starts to get too hot, and we could kind of see when Joe was doing it, especially when we were doing this lap joint here, you can start to see the puddle get bigger, 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 bigger like that. That's when you can tell that you're either, and running too hot could be a bunch of things. It could be that you have the pedal too far and the amperage is too high. It could just be that you're traveling too slow. In Joe's case, that was a big part of it. He was trying and learn all the different things at once. He was moving really, really slow. So when you see that puddle start to open up and get out of control, that can be part of it. If you're seeing undercutting like he has here, that could be that it's a little too hot on the piece, or you're moving too slow. The discoloration of the metal can also cause that as well. And of course, if you're blowing through, I mean, if you get a hole in it, you're running too hot, of course. But that's the big thing, is just watch that puddle. Make sure that the puddle, when you start, and keep that in the back of your head, the size of the puddle. And if you see it's twice, 3 times of what you started with, you're running way too hot, or you're moving too slow, or not adding enough filler rod. A few things could cause that, but good.
Okay, and then let's see, the last question we got, Sound Control on YouTube, he's going to TIG weld his quarter skins in soon.
Okay.
And he said it's about 5 feet of weld. Should he be doing long runs, or should he be doing little short sections and bouncing around like you would with a MIG weld?
Right. Go ahead, Joe. Joe's got this. He knows.
This is exactly what I was hinting towards earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but as far as technique, I would recommend not doing a solid run. Like we said, that would probably increase the chance of any distortion in the panel. So, I mean, don't take my exact advice, but I mean, in theory, you could actually just add multiple small tacks and eventually complete the chain. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to go that extreme of like bouncing around, or yeah, you can do little stitches at a time until it eventually creates the entire seam. Yeah,
it's not bad.
Thanks.
The answer that I could give, we're getting more into intermediate or advanced stuff. The best possible thing you could do is you can run it in one pass if you're that good. Now, what causes warping is the inconsistent warping is the differences in the heat. So when people jump around, like you were really hot here and maybe this one you weren't as hot, mm-hmm. That's what creates the big inconsistencies. So if you get good enough that you can weld a 5-foot section in one pass, which isn't realistic, but if you could do half or big sections at the same heat, the same speed, if you're consistent, it's going to warp all the same. So when you hammer and dolly it, it's going to give you that the same type of shrink. So you can reverse that shrinkage the same. If you jump around and your heat's all over the place, you got to hit one seam harder than the other seam. So You are right, and generally most times jumping around like that is going to be best for most people, but once you get better, like I've gotten to the point where I'll try and do half a whole section if I can, because if you got a good run going, you just keep moving, but you got to be real fast. I mean, that's the key with this is sheet metal, there's no second chance you can blow a big hole instantly, so you got to move quick and keep the heat down is really important. So jumping around when you're first learning how to do this is important, but once you get a little bit better, try taking further runs, but keep an eye on your heat zone. That's the thing that really will tell you what's going on. So when you weld sheet metal, it's real nice and clean. You'll see that heat zone. If you got a real small heat zone around your weld, until that heat zone starts opening up, keep moving. I mean, if you can keep it there, that's good.
Right on.
That's a great question.
I think we're all good.
Sweet.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks,
So
Joe.
you think you learned a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a good foundation to start practicing, and I mean, that seems to be the key with this. I mean, these machines are real simple to learn the basics. Got the little chart that kind of get you going, and then just keep practicing, and eventually you'll start kind of understanding how the variables play together, and kind of
Hands-on, that's TIG welding's hands-on. That's the biggest thing. Once you can read all the articles online and all the YouTube videos, but until you start just laying filler rod and burning filler rod, you're
exactly. I mean, I'm all theory. I've been watching you do it, but I've never
done the different things.
done the things, So
yeah, you got some lunch breaks ahead of you, and you can
I
be
do.
Right there.
So
Cool. Well, thanks guys for watching as always. And thank you, Joe, for letting me teach you. That was pretty fun. So again, we've been doing videos every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, trying to do more project-oriented videos or how-to videos. So if you guys have anything you would like to see Joe learn, give us a comment there, and we can show you guys how we teach Joe. Or if there's anything you want to see project-related, definitely drop us a line, and we can do our best to do those. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.